Hey everybody. So today we're going to look at color correcting some stuff we shot logarithmically. This was shot for an image campaign for our station. This is Vanessa Welsh. She is our evening anchor. And since we were doing an image spot for the evening team, we lit the set darker. We also pushed it really to blue. You can't see them, but we got 4 massive 8-foot fluorescent tubes. I think we rented them from a High Output in Canton. And we put them on the set to give the set a bluer look. This was shot in the Sony FS7, Slog 3. We used a Sony zoom lens to get all these shots, and we also put these shots on a cinema slider. Now, normally you would put a cinema slider so it moved like this in front of your talent, but what we did is we put it kind of an angle facing the talent like this, and this is the shot we ended up with. You can see we get a nice shot basically dollying into our talent, but it's on a slider. Now, I'm no director of photography, but we've used this slider a lot, and I've noticed to get a really good and a really interesting shot with a slider, you need 3 elements. You need something in the foreground, which is these cameras, something in the midground, which is Vanessa, and something in the background. This wall, we call it the BAM, is probably, 30 feet behind her. So when you take the foreground elements, the cameras, the midground elements, the talent, and a background element, you get a super nice parallax when you move it with a slider. Now, we shot this S-Log, and we shot it with all those blue lights because we really wanted a dark spot. It's our nighttime crew. We wanted to have a cool blue nighttime feel. So again, when I shoot log, I always tend to do this kind of the same way. So let's look at the scopes first. Nothing is clipped, and nothing is crushed. Now, this black right here, that's pretty black. That's all this camera equipment here. I guess technically that blue might be crushed. I'm not sure what that is. Might be this right here or some of this in here. This floor and these cameras are picking up that fluorescent blue from those fluorescent tubes that we rented. But that's a good thing. That's what we wanted. But let's take a look at our first node here, which is usually an exposure node, and in this case it is. So all I've done is I've brought down my lift a little bit so we can get those blacks on those cameras, blacks. I've brought down my gamma a lot, and I've increased my gain. So I want these highlights kind of popping out back here. Node 1, especially when I shoot log footage like this, is always an exposure node. I don't use LUTs. LUTs are for wimps. You can watch my other video I did about log footage to understand why I think LUTs are for wimps. I joke about it, but I think LUTs are kind of restrictive. I don't like to use LUTs. So if you want to correct a spot or a movie or whatever without a LUT, the first node with log footage is probably going to have to be an exposure node where you put that shot on planet Earth. The second node is also an exposure node. I did a couple things. I brought my gamma down a little bit, and I pushed my gammas to red just a little bit. And the reason is because, and this was our fault, we didn't use any of the new set lighting. We turned all the lights off, and we had those blue rental lights I spoke about, and you can see it's starting to pick up all that blue. All this blue here, and then the blacks. That's all from the lights we rented. We put 2 Kinoflow lights on our talent, and it turns out the lights were a bit green. That was our bad. We didn't really notice it till we finished, but that's the kind of the beauty of shooting log is it's really, really easy to fix stuff. Now, it wasn't a nuclear green cast on poor Vanessa here, but it was just a little bit green, and it threw it off, and I could easily correct that by moving my gammas towards red. Let's look at it off. Say she's kind of looking a little green, a little pale there. Let's turn the node back on. I put some red back in her face. I also cheated the highlights a bit more towards blue, so I wanted to get some of these blue bright spots here even bluer. And I also did a hue versus sat. I cranked up the reds here. You can see hue versus sat. So what this is saying is all the reds in the picture are going up a bit because the light temperature was ever so slightly wrong. We were losing the chroma in her face. And again, that was my bad, but with the beauty of log, we can fix it. And hue versus hue, same thing. I brought it down a little bit so I got a little more red in her face. Oh, one more thing. I found that helpful when you shoot log footage to adjust your curves. I've crushed my blacks just a little bit so these cameras are here and some of this black here on the BAM. And I brought up the brights just a little bit. So this is a shot, I call it playing golf. I'm just getting closer with each node. So when I've got the shot looking okay, I go to the next node. So these 2 shots, Basically, the first one is exposure. The second one was also an exposure node, giving a little more contrast and putting a little bit more color back into her face and making those blues a little bluer. So in our third node here, I noticed that dress, if you look on the scopes, was getting into a bad spot, I felt, in the red. Too much red, even in high definition, I feel. The reds will start to tear. You're going to start losing detail. So this node, the third node, all I did, hue versus sat, brought the red a little bit down. It's not doing any favors to her face. We're losing some saturation in her face, but we'll fix that later. So in this node, the dress was really getting on my nerves. I qualified it. I put some of the red back in her dress. I also qualified it because I knew it might be a problem later on as I start color correcting more and start pushing colors around more and more. So sometimes I'll key something like this that I know could be a problem, because when I get down to some of these nodes down here, it's sometimes easier to pull the key earlier, because if you've done lots of masks and white circles and power windows and stuff, sometimes it can be trickier to key it down here. So sometimes I found, I know this red dress is going to be a problem, so I qualified it way up here to make the adjustments easier. So in this node, I finally started to address the color in her face. I qualified her, and then I drew a mask around her face, and I tracked it. I had to track pan and tilt because she's moving around. I also tracked zoom, or Z, if you're watching this in Europe, because the shot is coming at us. I tracked 3D. I'm not 100% sure why. And I also tracked rotate, which I probably did not have to do, but her face is not rotating around that much, meaning it's not doing this. So it was neither here nor there if I tracked rotate. I just tracked it with an on. And what I've done is, you can see that it's the wrong kind of lights. The lights we had were a little green, but again, we're shooting log, easy to fix. I can turn that on, and I just put some reds back in the gain and the gamma of that picture. Really subtle, really easy, but again, it's a big difference from this as to what we shot to this. I've noticed that sometimes when you shoot log, faces can sometimes get a bit washed out, or they have a bit less color. So when we do an image shoot, especially with an anchor, I will always try to get a makeup artist. I don't think we had one for this shoot. I can't remember. It was a while ago. But I'll try to get a makeup artist, and I will show her pictures of Vanessa or Mark or whoever we're working with talent-wise, and I'll say, this is what they look like on a news set. This is what they look like in a field. And I've saved stills of the talent, so you can work with your makeup artist and say, look, under these lighting conditions, shooting S-Log 3, this person's face turns a little green, or it turns a little red, or there's not a lot of chroma in it. If you can work with a makeup artist beforehand, it'll save you a lot of time and trouble in post-production. But like I said, this was our bad. The lights were a bit off. We've since replaced all the bulbs in our KinoFlows, and our talent looks a lot better. But you can see, little green, little pale, little washed out, qualified, and it's fixed. So this really highlights the power of shooting logarithmic footage. If we really look at Vanessa's face, there's a bit of a shine here and a bit of a shine here. That's just how we arrange the lights, but in log, I can fix it. See what I've done? If you look here and here, that little shiny spot, I've taken it out. I keyed her face, and if we can look, it's just the hottest parts of her face. And you adjust your luminance, the low and the high, to get this perfect. You want to blur it a lot because you don't want any jaggedy edges, any boiling edges. Let me play it down. That's looking pretty good. Not a lot of boiling or jaggedy edges, but it's just the hottest spots of her face, the bridge of her nose, her forehead up there, her cheek. That's with the correction off. This is with the correction on. All I've done is adjusted my gain, and I've literally put some more red in that white part. And it kind of balances out that skin tone. Let's look at it on. And now let's look at it off. So you can see off, there's a lot of shine there. Not looking so good. I'm going to turn it on. And all that shine is gone. Now you have to be super careful when you do this, and you've got to play it and look at it, because when this doesn't work, it looks horrible. It looks terrible, and your talent will not look good at all. Make sure you're matching that flesh tone perfectly. You want to make sure the color you're adding really matches the color of her skin. In this case, it did happen to match, and I mean, that's a really slight adjustment, but we've gotten rid of a lot of that shine on her face. Okie doke. So the next note is I had to take care of her hands. You can see here her hands, they probably weren't lit correctly. They're probably a little dark. And again, this was our fault. The lights weren't quite right. So I've keyed her hands. We get a little bit of this in the background. Don't particularly care. I get a little of this over here. Don't particularly care. I drew a circle wipe around it. I don't think I tracked it because her hands weren't moving. I mean, you're picking up some of her, is that her dress? You're picking up some stuff on the floor. I mean, I really don't care. You don't notice it, but you can really notice her hands. So this is with the correction off. Not looking so attractive. This is with it on. I brightened up the gamma just a little bit, and I brightened up the gain a lot so we can get a better exposure. And I just put some red back in her hands. You know, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Sometimes when you shoot log, your skin can get a little flat, I've noticed. And the beautiful thing about shooting in log is it's real easy to fix. So eyes are the window to the soul, correct? And I will do this a lot on shots we've lit properly and beauty shots and shots for image promos is I've basically drawn a window, an oval around her eye, and I've tracked it. Pan, tilt, Z if you're in Europe, or zoom everywhere else. Rotate and 3D. And I drew it at the beginning here, and it's going to track with her face. You can see that shape is tracking with her eye, even on her head turn here a little bit. You can see it tracking with her face as she turns. The Resolve Tracker is pretty good, particularly on faces, particularly with eyes. I don't know what it is, but this tracker does great with eyes. And I'm going to turn the window off so we can see what's going on here. So I want to bring her eyes out. And this is a great way to do it. After you've drawn the shape, you can see here, I'm just lifting the gain ever so slightly. And your eyes are now drawn to her eyes because we've basically relit them. Her eyes are now brighter. Your eyes are now drawn into her eyes, which is where I want you to look. So let me play it with. It's playing so slow because our sand is full. And I'm going to play it with it off. Subtle, but it does make a difference. I brought her eyes out. And lastly, you can never go wrong doing an oval. So I've drawn this oval around Vanessa, and I sharpened the footage ever so slightly. You probably won't see this on YouTube, but I came in and I sharpened it. It defaults to 0.5. I don't know why. I put it at 0.47. It just sharpens her up a little bit, and it just is working around this part of the picture. And I darkened the outside. So these cameras are a lot darker, and this over here is darker. So between Vanessa being spotlighted and her eyes being highlighted like that, you're really drawn into her. Plus the camera is tracking on the slider, and it's moving into Vanessa. And you are literally drawn into this talent. You're pushing in, and you can see her eyes better, and she's silhouetted quite nicely. All right, so it was my plan to show you 2 shots from this promo, but I got to talking, and I only had time to show you really 1 shot. I'm trying to keep these videos between 13 and 15 minutes each. So I'm going to make a separate video about the second shot, but I will show you this promo in its entirety as it aired. So I hope this helped you guys. If you have any questions, just put them in the comment area, and do me a big favor. Push the like button and subscribe to this channel. So I'm going to try to put one out once a week, every Monday or Tuesday, depending how busy I get. And happy correcting, everybody.
Get one step ahead every night on Boston 25 News at 10.
Know what's happening right now live with coverage that's immediate and accurate.
Breaking news and new details on stories that are important to you.
We're dedicated to giving you both sides of the story.
And investigations leading to real change, making a difference in our community. I'm tracking how developing weather overnight will affect your morning commute and impact your day.
It's coverage that keeps you one step ahead every night on Boston 25 News at 10.